You're listening to the number one podcast for oil and gas professionals. What's up? Mike Fry, President and CEO of Deepwater Subsea. I am here with Dallas Bozeman.
Hey, what's happening?
What's happening, D? Welcome back from vacation.
Yeah, you welcome back.
Yeah, got back in early yesterday morning, about 4:45 from Brazil. A nice 10-hour flight. It's always enjoyable, but it's good to be back. It's good to be back and rolling. Got a lot of great things working in the works. And so, excited to kick out another podcast.
Yeah. So you were gone, a week this time?
Yeah, I was gone a week. I'm back for a week. Then I'm gone for another week. Kind of phase 2 of the project we're working on.
Yeah. So you've been down there twice now. What's happening down in Brazil?
So we're doing training. That's a good question. So we're doing training with one of the drilling contractors. As you know, we like to do performance-based training and assessments, and then we customize that training. So what I did is the first time I went down about 6 months ago, we did, some people call them competency assessments. I think competency is kind of an overused term, but performance-based knowledge assessments are like really getting an understanding. Do the guys know how to do their job? And then what we did is we took the gaps in the areas where they were weak and we built customized training to improve on those knowledge areas. And it's really beneficial because they're getting 100%, of the training that they need customized for them.
Yeah. So you talked about performance-based assessments and knowledge-based assessments. What's the advantage of a performance-based assessment over the knowledge-based?
So good question. So a knowledge-based assessment would be like me just giving you a test. You're just retrieving information. 1 + 1 is 2. Well, we know that because it's been built into us. Performance-based assessments. Now some people will do like a written assessment, like explain to me how you would do the following. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people, and I for one am one, when it comes to having to write out what I'm looking to do or what I want to do, you're challenged with putting the words on paper. So what we do is we do oral assessments, and it's kind of like the boards that we have when we're in the military, where I sit down and I ask you different levels of questions based on things that you would be exposed to in the workplace, and how you would go about handling those situations. Like explain to me the purpose of this, and how would you troubleshoot that, and draw for me on the board this. And what it does is it truly lets me know where your strengths and weaknesses are, because you can guess on a multiple choice test. I've taken tests that we've developed and didn't even look at the questions, and I got 50%, 40%. I've given the test that we've created to my daughter, who's never worked in oil and gas and has no idea. And guess what? She got answers right. A performance-based assessment is just that. It's just an oral board. Basically, we have a program that we built. We have 270 questions. The beauty of it is I can ask you a question, and if I don't feel like you're giving me the right answer or trying to give me a runaround, I can then ask you a second, third, and fourth question on top of that and make sure you truly understand it, versus a knowledge-based assessment, which you just go, when in doubt, Charlie out, and hopefully I got it right. Yeah.
So that oral assessment, would you say it offers flexibility? You can kind of steer it wherever you want, or? Yeah.
So it's another good question. If I'm sitting down talking to you and I give you, we'll talk about oil and gas for subsea guys. I'm asking you questions about the diverter system, and you're just pounding them out. And I know that you know this topic. I can very quickly go into a different direction. At the same point, if you're struggling, I can dive much deeper, kind of based on those 6 steps to becoming a subject matter expert that we have. And that's how we built it. If you might be nervous about the question, and I might throw you a hint and be like, okay, now explain it to me. I've also done it before where you might be explaining it to me wrong, and I'll let you continue to explain it to me, draw it on the board. Your drawing's a mess. And then I'll ask you to troubleshoot your drawing, and then watch you go, sorry, hold on a second. Let me fix my drawing. It's wrong. That lets me understand that you're thinking about the process of what's taking place, and you're away from just retrieval. You're now to more of the application of the knowledge, the comprehension and application of it.
Yeah. So I know here at Deepwater Subsea, we're big on gap analysis. We're also big on ensuring that people retain information and that we're providing a good product. So You were in Brazil. You went back 6 months later. What's the benefit of that return trip and the gap analysis and going back and revisiting with the guys that you've already trained once before?
Yeah. So the big challenge, so this is based on research. And so there's a doctor, Dr. Will Thadheimer, he's up out of Boston. And one of the things that he talked about is the 5 failures of workplace learning and workplace development. One of the big things with that was feedback. So much focus is on the feedback at the moment the class is done versus the carryover to the workplace. Now, being able to go back 3, 4, 5, 6 months later and sit down with the guys and say, okay, one, I get to reassess them on, did they retain the knowledge? That's an assumption that too many people make, is that, hey, he's come through the course, he's going to actually retain it and apply it to the workplace. And two, it allows me to go back to the course and go, what I provided to you the first time from a knowledge and training, was it actually applicable? And did you find value in it when you went to apply it? We're doing the project with the GE guys. And so part of the way we developed the class was 2 classes in, you go offshore for a couple of hitches, then you come back for the third. The feedback that we get in that third class is probably more valuable than some of the feedback we get at the moment the class is over with. So the carryover to the workplace, that feedback is really, it's invaluable when it comes to assessing, the output of what you're given for a training.
So we're doing the customized training, right? So it's more about what are our clients' needs, particular to their project or their challenges. There has to be some kind of financial benefits to training that way as well.
Sure. I mean, it's funny because if you look at standard course development, one of the big things that training organizations do and just companies that want to provide training, they might not be a true, 100% focus on training, is they'll pick a topic and they'll say, I think people need to learn about muck systems, for example. And then they'll look at the target audience and they'll say, well, if we build this class, who all could come to it? And it's really financially driven. How big is the pool that we could pull from? And then what they do is they identify the expected outcomes. Like, if we get these guys to come to class, what is it that we want them to learn and take back to the workplace? And part of the way they do that is they go through the KSAs and knowledge, skills, and abilities. And for a lot of companies in oil and gas, they just pick off from what IADC has. IADC says, hey, for BOP control systems, you should know the following. And so they go, okay, well, we'll pick off that list, and then we'll build a class on muck systems for subsea guys and ETs that cover all these things. And then they start developing it. What are the learning methods? It could be 3D. It could be, could be hands-on. It could be whatever. And then they go through the assessment. The problem is, I'll just give you a quick example. There are classes out there today that focus on well control equipment. Now, if I'm on a Cameron BOP, and I've talked about this before, 66% of what's being taught in that class doesn't apply to me. Now, there'll be people who say, oh, there's good benefit to learning how the other systems work. But if I'm trying to improve your knowledge and your application, I'm potentially confusing you by giving you more information than what you truly need. Not only that, in today's ADD world with your mobile phones or your computers or whatever, go sit in a class and watch what happens when you start drifting off a topic that doesn't apply to somebody. Boom, those phones are coming out, that tablet's coming out, because I'm not interested in it anymore. I want to know about the Cameron BOP. So to your question about the financial benefit, by building a truly customized 100% course, when we went back down to support the drilling contractor, I was able to say, hey, look, here's the gaps. Here's where your guys were strong. Here's where your guys are weak, and develop one course that covered those areas. If you tried to do this on the outside with cookie cutter courses, your 101s and 201s and these classes that are just out there for the open public, you'd have to take multiple courses to be able to get the same value that you would out of a 1 week class with us.
Yes. And you bring up a good point with the performance-based and being sure that these things are customized to the client, because whenever we hear about critical thinking a lot in the industry, we're missing critical thinking. We're not planning ahead. We're not looking forward. If we're doing everything knowledge-based, it's typically just, repetition and regurgitating information. Do we know the system components? Yes. Okay. That only gets you so far. If I had to define critical thinking, I would define it as performance in context. Can you perform in different contexts, different variations? If we're just doing knowledge-based assessments, then we're completely missing that piece, that critical thinking aspect. Can you apply the knowledge in a context or in a situation that's going to be beneficial to you, and with the ability to desire or to achieve the desired outcome on the backside? So if I ask somebody, hey, do you understand how this thing functions? Yeah, absolutely. These are the components. This is how it works. Great. If this was to not work properly, what's the secondary method? What's the tertiary? And if we can't troubleshoot that backwards, then we're going to miss a gap somewhere later on. It's going to cost not only our company money, it's going to cost us a lot of efficiency. That being said, what is the benefit of spacing these instructional periods out and revisiting them?
Yeah. So, again, science of learning. So we talk about the learning and forgetting curve. Research has shown, and it happens to all of us. Just think about in the workplace, you get to Friday and you're like, what did I do this week? You're not even in a learning environment. You're just in your normal workplace. The spaced out learning and repetition just reinforces the information you learned the first time. It helps you retrieve it, revisit it, and it keeps it fresh in your mind. We've all heard of like, it's called rote learning, ROTE, but pump and dump. I used to say this for well-controlled school. That was that type of learning for me. Every so many years, I had to go take this class. As long as I passed it, I got a certificate. Once I was done, I'm done with it. Pump and dump is basically you learn as much as you can, as fast as you can, regurgitate it, and then you forget it. If you take the same guys 6, 8, 12, 14, 18 months later and said, here, I want you to take this test with no kind of refresher training, the majority of them would fail because you've completely forgot. By revisiting this learning, and there's a lot of different tools that you can use for it. It just makes the retention of that knowledge much, much greater.
Yeah. I think it really reminds me of that learning forgetting curve whenever we look at the knowledge retention, where especially with well control, something that's got like a 2-year gap where you have this huge spike right after somebody attends the course. And then it's just it's a drop from that point on, kind of gradual at first and then steeper later as we get on. And then it spikes back up again at the 2-year mark when we revisit. So I think that spacing, that's one of those things where it keeps us more flatlined across that period, as opposed to having these huge gaps in proficiency along the way.
Yeah. And when we talk about especially subsea, that's our focal point, and what we do is think about how often you actually work on the blowout preventer. If I'm, Gulf of Mexico, maybe 21 and 21, I might be doing, 7, 8 hitches. If I'm international, I'm doing 6 hitches. I might not even see the blowout preventer for an entire year. How much am I going to remember? I know based on just, repetition that, hey, this is this valve, this is what this goes. But if I don't have these kind of on the job training tools, checklists, little, placard cards to say, hey, look, when you're inspecting this, make sure you look for the following. We're assuming that, and that's where procedural drift comes in, is that people will just retain every bit of knowledge from procedures, from training, and from everything to do their job. And the reality is research shows that you just physically will not be able to do that. And that's something that's very, why are guys in technical field support good at their jobs? Because they do it every day. People will forget. It's like, oh no, I remember when this happened one time. And they might go ask somebody else. And it's like, oh yeah, no, now I remember, because they're having to revisit the entire experience versus, can you tell me what happened? You remember 2 years ago when this happened? It's like, yeah, I kind of remember it. That's what happens during rig moves and happens during a lot of things. But if you're not constantly learning, you're constantly forgetting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a concept that's new. This isn't something that has just been come up with and we're like, well, let's just try it out and see if it works. If I look back to Naval School Explosive Ordnance Disposal when I went through, that is a career field that's 75 years old. Yes, there are knowledge-based and written tests that are applied there, but you don't go anywhere without a performance exam. Every single time you go through a different division, you learn a new skill set. You have to go out and you have to perform that skill set. And you never know what the scenario is. You show up, somebody hands you a written piece of paper with a scenario on it, and an instructor's there to evaluate, and he says, hey, you either got 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever the time cap is. The hazards are removed, but all the functions are the same. And they say, listen, you're either a go or a no-go. You can either take the information we've given you, apply it correctly, or you can't. And if you're a non-performer, then it's just from that point on, knowledge can't save you. If you say, yeah, I have all the knowledge and all the retention in the world, I could tell you how to work something, left, right, inside out. It doesn't matter. If you can't go out and actually perform the job, and you can't perform it in a situation where it becomes stressful and people are relying on you, then you're really of no value to the industry.
Yeah. And so, bringing that up, so when you're talking about the cognitive domain and like memory and knowledge retention, you really start getting into what's called Bloom's taxonomy. And it's a true, being able to assess one's learning ability. And what I find interesting is you're talking about the knowledge-based versus performance-based. The lowest level of Bloom's taxonomy is knowledge. And really, you're just reciting information. You're regurgitating the things that you already know. How do we know, the answer to, 10 times 10? Because we've done it over and over and over again. We know what that answer is. Comprehension really gets into more understanding. So the next level of Bloom's taxonomy is comprehension. And that's really starting to understand like the inner workings of the systems. If we look at our, 6 steps of subject mastery, can you identify it? Do you understand how it works? Do you understand how to do maintenance on it? So now we're getting into the comprehension. Well, the most important level is the application of the learning, the performance-based part of it. We rely on OJTs, but as you know, OJTs for a lot of companies are pencil whipped, but knowledge is the lowest level. And unfortunately, giving people written tests, multiple choice tests, does not truly give you an understanding of how somebody would apply that knowledge. I'll use it as an example of, I could be a really good student and I could pass the bar exam, but I might be a horrible lawyer. I could take a test to become a heart surgeon. I learn everything there is to know about it. But unfortunately, since my neck surgery, my left hand shakes at times like I have Parkinson's disease. I'm not the one you want to be in there cutting on your heart, but I have the knowledge. I just can't apply that knowledge to the actual workplace. And that is where the performance-based assessment really comes in to be of value, is doing a walk around. Now it takes longer. There's cost to it. It's easy to build a multiple choice e-learning exam, kick it out. One email goes out to everybody. Everybody takes the test and I go, here's my strong guys. Here's my weak guys. But you might find out that your weaker guys are actually your smarter guys when it comes to the hands-on application versus, the other way around, which are guys that smoked the test and couldn't rebuild something to save their life.
Yeah. I think the Bloom's taxonomy, it brings up another good point for almost like a defense for the oral evaluations, because in Bloom's taxonomy, it's not just the questions, it's how you ask the questions. It's the key words that go in there and how you drive someone to engage different parts of the brain to whether or not they're trying to, recite or retrieve information, or if they're actually trying to put it in context and develop their own theories. So can you talk a little bit about those key words and how it guides them?
Yeah. So, just for an example, we're talking about knowledge. So I mentioned earlier about our performance-based assessment. We have 270 questions, and it could be, 1,000 questions, but 270 main questions broke out over 13 topics, and they're weighted. And people go, well, how did you weight these questions? Well, I weighted them based on Bloom's taxonomy. So I'm looking at knowledge, I'm looking at comprehension, I'm looking at application. Really, if you think about it, it's pretty easy. It's like, can you list for me the major components of an annular? That's a knowledge-based type question. Can you recognize, what is component A? Well, that's the lower cylinder. So again, knowledge, retention, just basic information that you're looking at. And so when you talk about comprehension, it's can you define for me? Can you interpret? Can you predict what would happen if I lost pressure to X? Can you predict for me what would happen to the rest of the system? Now I have to understand how the entire system works. And so just by re-questioning or rewording the questions, I can elicit different responses. Now, when I get into the application, it's can you demonstrate? Can you show me how you would do this? Where on the diverter panel would you isolate if this took place? What could possibly go wrong if you did do this? That's the application, and you can really go through all of them. And this is where I really enjoy what we do from a performance-based assessment. I mentioned I can ask you one question and go multiple levels very quickly. Can you identify for me this component? Yes. All right. Can you explain to me how that component works? Yes. I've gone from knowledge to comprehension. Now it's, what would you do in this situation? Now I've just taken the same question and put it into an application. And you can't do that with a knowledge-based multiple choice test.
No, you can't. Just looking at the information available and the research that's available, there's no way that you can even argue that knowledge-based is in any way able to outperform the performance-based assessments. I mean, the depth of knowledge required and the skills and ability it requires to actually conduct a performance assessment and show competency, you can't duplicate that anywhere else. And I feel like it'd be very hard to duplicate outside of customized training. Yeah.
And the thing to keep in mind is, everybody has competency programs, OJT programs. They have their own assessments. They have all this other stuff. This isn't a business pitch, but the biggest challenge that you're going to find is people doing your internal assessments are friends of the people that they're assessing. Very rarely have I ever heard, I went out to this rig to do an assessment and the following people were, and I don't like using the term incompetent, had areas of weaknesses that they need to improve on. But at the same time, having a third party like a deep water subsea do an assessment, you actually also look at the management of the competency program. So one of the things that we do is we look at the training matrices, we look at the OJT program. Then when I'm doing an assessment, I also look at kind of their CV, like what is their experience level. That way, when I do this assessment, it's not that John Doe is weak. It's John Doe's never been exposed to the following things. It's not that, John Doe can't do it. Nothing on the training matrices, nothing on his OJT. And so he might be weak in this area, but he's never been exposed to it. We did an assessment on an individual, one of the drilling contractors called and said, can you go out and do a competency assessment on a couple guys? We have weak areas. And matter of fact, they're like, we don't know if we even want to keep them. So I went out. What was interesting is the OJT, the competency program for the company, said the individual is competent. That was signed 4 months earlier. Now all of a sudden he's incompetent. Went out, did the assessment, the areas where he was weak, other than like, hey, go do this. He was never exposed to formalized training. Now you can't get formalized training for everything we do in subsea. Some of it has to come on the job. But the reality and the interesting thing is very quickly he went from competent to incompetent to, hey, we want to get rid of him. But yet your internal system said that he was good to go. So if you're going to do a competency-based program or an assessment, you have to have people who are willing to go out and ask tough questions. You have to have guys in the field who are willing to kind of expose themselves to understand their areas of improvement. I think also from a training development standpoint, if you're a training provider, there's things that you really need to take a look in the mirror for or in the mirror about. And some of my competition could take this, and take offense to it. But, there's 5 major failures that take place in training development and the delivery of training. And I think the majority of the companies fail at this in many ways. One, they forget about minimizing the learning and forgetting curve. It's like, here's your course. Thank you very much. Give me my check, get out. Companies don't provide follow through. And what I mean by that is that, like, hey, you've gone back to the field. How was the training? Do you have all the tools and resources? So you're building a course that isn't applicable. It's not that it's not applicable to the individual. It's like, you really don't care what the outcome is, as long as you were able to get a certificate to say, hey, look how successful our class is. Promoting, these tools. one of the things that we're looking to do with our subsea management class is actually build little, I don't want to call it a cue card, but it's like, hey, here is where in the rules and regulations you could find the following things. That way the subsea guys in the field are like, where was that section in API that I had to do this? Oh, let me just go to my card and I can find it real quick. The expectation is once you've gone to the class, people think that the guys are just going to retain everything they've learned. And the reality is that doesn't take place. And last but not least, they really fail, or two things. They fail at leveraging on the job training. Part of that's also the drilling contract of the employer. It happened down in Brazil. So I did this training class. Everything was great. How'd it go? Tell me about what it was like going back to the rig. Yeah, we really don't have time to do the type of training that you talked about. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Well, we have so much stuff going on with maintenance and all this other stuff. And I said, look, we're talking about 30, 20, 10. If just take 30 minutes and go look at this stuff. But unfortunately, the workplace didn't support the development of the guys. And so last but not least is we don't get good feedback, and that's that follow-on feedback from months down the road. And with today's technology of autoresponders, and you could set it up very easily to go, hey, look, guys, I'm not looking for your evaluation, or maybe here's your immediate evaluation, and then we're going to send you another one in a couple months and let me know what you think about the training. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of areas where we as an industry can improve. Customized training to me is definitely the way to go. When you talk about cost, I would rather develop and deliver one class than have to develop and deliver 10, especially in a down market. No one's going to pay for 10, but they'll sure as hell invest in one, especially if it's going to give their employees everything they're looking for.
No, I absolutely agree. It's hard to deny the benefits, but so getting ready to wrap it up. One last question to all the operators and contractors and guys out in the industry right now. What does the future of performance training look like?
I think that, the future for us is very easy. It's truly understanding what the needs are of the guys. If I look at a subsea guy today and I go, what does he really need to be trained in? He needs to be trained in his equipment. He needs to be trained in what he really does on the job. And when it comes to delivery of it, it really comes down to understanding the different assumptions that training people face. And what I mean by that is we have to understand that you can't assume that the guys are going to learn what they've been taught. You have to reinforce that learning with repetition. You have to understand that guys probably aren't going to be motivated for that training, because it's like, I'm coming off the rig. Gosh, I got to go to a course, I just want to go home. We've talked about that before. You got to also understand that, you got to make it to where it's going to be beneficial for them. If they're going to come to a class, they got to be able to take it back to the field, and you got to give them the resources to be able to execute it. So performance-based training, it really comes down to the gap analysis and building a course specifically to the needs of your people. And it's very easy to do. It really, really is. You can do a couple assessments, and if you think of cost, the cost of doing the assessments in one course versus taking the guys through 5 courses, hands down, performance-based training is definitely the way to go. And it also lets you know, does the guy really know how to do his job?
Absolutely.
And so, no, it's been good. It's good to be back. I know we went kind of long, but if you're an organization looking at your people and you're looking at your training matrices, really you need to evaluate it, because unfortunately, as an industry, oil and gas, the military is pretty much a combination of knowledge and performance. You get, here's the basics, and now we're going to put the application in place. I went to 16 weeks of torpedoman A school. The first couple of weeks were tools and their uses, schematics, understanding the foundation, the basics. And then we started getting into, it's Bloom's taxonomy, but the comprehension and the application and getting out. So when we got to the field, I could walk onto a submarine and go, I know what that is. I know how that works. It doesn't work like that in oil and gas. But if you're an organization, I would really start with, do our training matrices and our OJT programs provide the level of knowledge that our guys need to execute? And what you might find out is the answer is no. You can't just grab an OEM and go, okay, they need to go to a Cameron school, they need to go to an Auker school, and they need to go to, whatever school. And that school is going to give them everything they need. You got to have repetition. You got to have new stimulus to enforce the knowledge and the retention. And Yeah, I think it's going to be a big change for oil and gas, but there's companies out there doing it. Obviously we're doing it, and our customers are really seeing the value in it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to have you back. Looking forward to rolling into 2017 strong and all the new programs that we have coming up.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot of good things coming out. And, and the funny thing is people, I say this kind of proud, but people are like, where do you guys come up with a lot of the things that you do? It's based on research and experience. And we take the experience that Dallas and I had from the military, along with research that PhD, type people, we're talking MIT, we're talking, Yale, we're talking Stanford. Like, how do people truly learn? And then we look at how to apply it to oil and gas and apply it to the people who are our peers and the guys in the industry, and understand, like, okay, we can't do this because this isn't really how it works, And so, yeah, we're excited. We got a lot of new courses coming out, a lot of new, products coming out, and really just, I hate to say fast forward the calendar, but, I'd be happy if 2017 was tomorrow, but 2016 is going amazing, and we just keep on rolling.
That's right.
Every day is a hustle, right?
Every day.
Cool. It's good to be back. Again, if you ever got questions for Dallas or myself, please feel free to drop us an email at info@deepwatersubsea.com.